before I begin, I'd like to give a scenario of why I am doing research on 3D CAD models retrieval. So we have a company that specializes in design of CAD models, like engineering parts, and the manufacturing unit produces different aspects of engineering models, say vehicles or automobile engines. And now these models contain various parts. The ability to search for this model, in a database is very important. So in this scenario, we're looking at, after a number of years, several parts may have been produced, so it should be expensive for the company to, say, produce an existing CAD model or CAD part that has existed before. So there's need for an effective search and retrieval algorithm to bring out that model and save the company a cost. The second scenario is that we have lots of 3D models on the World Wide Web, for different applications like virtual reality and games and movies, medicine, and animation. And the number of 3D models on this World Wide Web grows tremendously. And so there will be need for an application to be able to search for say a certain 3D model for depending on the application area, and then to carry out whatever task is required. So the background is that, so we have a database, here we have a database of 3D models, and so it's huge. This is just an illustration. So this database is divided into classes. So we have the human class, we have different classes. So we have human, we have teddy, and then we have engineering parts. We have so many models in the database. So given a query model, the question is, how are we able to retrieve parts or components from the database containing several models that are similar to the query model? So given another model, we should also be able to retrieve similar parts from the model, and so on and so forth. So this concept brings about the research we are trying to do. Now when we take another look at this database, we see that there are two issues to it. The first one is the retrieval, and the next one is classification. So every model that are similar are grouped together, and so that is talking about the classification problem. So classification problem is not what we are interested in. Technical classification is the ability for a system or a technique to be able to group models that are similar. And then the next one is retrieval, which is the main aspect of why I'm doing my research. So querying a model from the database which I have obtained. And then that brings us to the idea of 3D content-based retrieval. So 3D content-based retrieval is simply retrieving a model from a database, like I've explained before. The motivation for this research, or technically speaking, why we have to do this, the motivation is that there are a great number of 3D models in the database. And so the ability to search for these models is very, very important. However, current retrieval techniques are not sophisticated enough to carry out the research. So 3D has many representation, which is part of the challenges to addressing the problem in the first place. So for a 3D model, we have the voxel representation, which is a volumetric pixel. So we have a pixel with XYZ coordinate, and so the voxel is just like a pixel in the two-dimensional plane. Then we have the surface model, we have the polygon mesh model, and then we have the point cloud model. Which model or which representation is effective for the problem we are trying to solve depends on the kind of application, depends on specifically what we are trying to do. So we find out in our work that we cannot work with all these representations. We have to pick one of the representations to work with, which I'm going to explain in due course. So 3D models, also another challenge is that 3D models occur in various deformations and defects. So considering these two models, we have one on our right hand side, it's a watertight model. Watertight in the sense that there is no deformation in the way the model has been given to us. And then on the left we have non-watertight. So as we can see, there's kind of hole in that model. And so if you are going to apply a particular information, a particular 3D models to solve our problem, we have to use the the results we get while working with meshes that are watertight are different from the kind of results we get while working with meshes that are non-watertight. But in this category, what is most important is that we have another kind of representation for our 3D models, which is the rigid models and then the non-rigid models. And then the combination of either rigid or non-rigid models gives us the generic model. And so we started off our work with working with generic model, but from my topic, which is 3D content-based retriever, we are working with rigid models, tag models, which falls under the rigid models category. But initially, we had to just play around with certain things to understand why or what is important or what we need to do, what specifically, what the best way is to solve our problems. Now, talking about representation, we have the common representation. There are many types of representation for 3D models. The most common ones are point cloud, like I mentioned before, the surface, the voxel, and the polygon mesh. And so we began with polygon mesh, and then eventually we ended up working with point cloud. We are going to see in the methods I'm going to explain. So technically, the goal for this research is to develop a more robust algorithm to be able to search for models from the database. And then they create highly discriminating 3D models. Well, 3D model shape descriptor, which should be accurate and also compact. The next goal or research aim is to evaluate the effectiveness of our retrieval algorithms, based on existing techniques, and then propose improved retrieval techniques for our content-based retrieval system. Finally, we want to investigate theoretical aspects of practical importance. To address this problem, 4 steps are to address the problem we are trying to solve. I summarized it into 5 steps, but 4 steps are more important. The first step is pre-processing step, which is optional. So we have a model from the database. We have to look at processing the model, either like computing for transformation or rotation or translation. That is optional depending on the type of sample we are working with. Then we extract features from from the models. Then after that, we compute a shape descriptor, we index our database, and then it is those shape descriptors that we are going to match to find out the similarity of the database model against the query model. And so this is technically the overview or system overview of a 3D content-based retriever. And so there are 2 steps to this. We have the offline state and then we have the online state. So what happens during the offline is we are given a large collection of 3D models. First of all, we compute shape descriptors like I explained before, put them in the database. So even a query model, by the right-hand side, which can come in the form of text-based, which is no more valid for certain reasons, or we sketch a model that fits the kind of object we want to retrieve from the database. But the current approach, what we are employing is to, like I showed before, given a query model, a 3D model, we should be able to match it, compute shape descriptor, and extract features, compute shape descriptor, and then remove the shape descriptors that was previously computed and indexed in the database, and then perform similarity or matching over this thing, and then similar models are retrieved to the user. So I summarize this in first step, which is shape descriptor computation, indexing of database like I've explained, and then we define a similarity matrix. How do we compare this depending on the algorithm as well? We'll talk about that later. Then we search and then bring out the result. Among these 4 steps, you could see that the step that is most important is the first step, which is shape descriptor computation. How we compute our shape descriptor is very important. But then what is this shape descriptor? It is nothing else but a mathematical representation of our 3D model. So we should be able to compute this shape descriptor. In other words, we call it feature vectors for every models in the database. So this is what we match to bring out similarity. So Um, yeah, we don't just compute shape descriptors. However, shape descriptor has to have the particular characteristics which are listed, beside. They have to be unique for every model, like I've explained. They have to be compact in their computation. They have to also be able to discriminate between the various kinds of models we are trying to compare, and then also efficient and several other characteristics. So, however, in literature or from previous research, we have two basic types of or classes of shape descriptors, the local and the global shape descriptors, or a combination of either local and global, or local versus local, or global versus global gives us another type of shape descriptor understood as the hybrid descriptor. We are going to implement, play around with existing technique and then come up with something novel. And so here is a research work from previous research known as spherical harmonics. So spherical harmonics is simply talking about the number of deformations we can deform in 3D models in order to have a perfect sphere. It's a whole lot of technicalities involved in understanding what spherical harmonics is, but the simple definition of this is how many deformations do we have to deform in 3D models in order to have a perfect sphere. So here we see the number of deformations for this particular plane model, and then those mathematical representations are being into a histogram. And so that is an existing work by Funkhauser. Another one is what we call shape distribution, and which is just a histogram of taking a random number of samples from the surface of a 3D models, being them into a histogram. Those histograms serve as shape descriptor for each of the 3D models, and the comparison of those descriptors gives us similarity information, which shows how similar any two models from a database is. And so here we have 5 types of shape distribution computed by Robert Osada. So we have the first one, which is the A3. So given a particular 3D model, we sample 3 points. The sample 3 points from the surface of the model, computes the angle between those 3 points, being those angle distribution in a histogram, and that becomes the shape descriptor for that particular model. Another method of variant of the shape distribution was the T1, which is computing the distance from the center of the 3D model to the surface, all other points in the surface, on the surface of the model. Then sampling random points from the surface of the 3D points, which is the D2, find the trivial distance between those two random points. That becomes the descriptor for that shape model. But all of this falls into the category of global shape descriptors. There are several number of them in literature, which we have tried to implement and come up with results. So we have this global descriptor as well, and then we also have this. So it's a whole lot talking about them. And so, like I said earlier, we also have local descriptor, which is for each point in the model, we find the local region and then compute descriptors around that local region, and then use that to describe a particular model. And so we have another local descriptor here. So I'm going to skip forward to what we have been able to do so far in the course of my PhD. So we have this one, which is called the spin images. And so what we have done so far is to implement existing techniques which I have discussed, and then apply those techniques for retrieval, which we have done, investigate the combination, what combination yields better result, and then leverage on that for our solution. So here we have the PCA-based method where we have to project our point from 3D space to 2D space, and that was a global descriptor. And we also, our current work, which has given an improvement, is that given 2 points and normal, we should be able to compute canonical coordinate system. From that canonical coordinate system, there are 4 features that can come out of that. And so the research here used that 4 features to have the alpha, beta, gamma, and rho. And we had to improve on this method by extending it from this 4 dimension to 6 dimension. And so this is just describing what alpha is, what beta is, what gamma and what rho is. And at the end of the day, we had a result which I'm going to skip forward. So these are just trying to explain the steps which are not necessary due to the cost of time. And so we have a result here where we have come up with a local feature 3D using 1,500 samples as opposed to the high number of samples that the previous work did. They used about 15,000 samples, but we have been able to propose or come up with a method that has used few number of samples. And so we perform some evaluation, and we come up with, I think, 2 features so far up until now, which, by God's grace, we are going to be able to publish in due course. And so here is, another category of result whereby we try to employ our retrieval, our algorithm for retrieval. And so we have some result of retrieval. And so here we search for a car, and then we have similar cars, and then some other models. And so the contribution is that we have been able to improve on existing method, and then we are having, like I said, better results and better calculation results, and then lower number of samples, which I have mentioned, and then algorithms is very easy and fast to compute. We are going to, in future, look at deep learning methods and apply the current algorithm to the bag of visual word model to have even better result and performance. And so we look at discussion like the global descriptors, what are their benefits, what are their downsides. The local descriptors, what are their benefits, what are their downsides. So those are the issues we are tackling and we are going to address in future. And that is it. Thank you very much.
Right, any quick questions? Questions, Chris?
So you've tried it on quite small sets of shapes, but you've got this ambition for very large sets. How will you evaluate the success of your method? Because on small sets of shapes, they're quite well selected, but all shapes everywhere is much different proposition.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I'm currently working on on a database from 2 benchmarks. So the first one is the Prestige. Time doesn't permit me to say everything. It's just a huge thing I'm trying to do or I've been doing. So we have the Prestige benchmark and the National Institute for Science and Technology, the NIST database. The Prestige benchmark have got the benchmark we've gone through, okay, and so they have the test samples which contains 902 3D models, ranging, it has 92 classes, and then in each of these classes we have several databases. So human beings have done, they've gone to like